Chapter 16. Phew. Ungom's eyes began to gleam as he stared in a daze at the blue sky. Certainly, he seemed like a normal kid at first, right? But this one was by no means ordinary. Will he be fine? Chung Myung's thick uniform was thoroughly drenched, and as the sweat poured from his body, it could be seen dripping through his clothes. With a face flushed red with blood, it seemed as if his head would burst at any moment. He struggled even to stand steady as his legs were trembling, and he could be seen biting tightly against his lips in order to keep moving. Would you like to sit? Ungom, who firmly regards courtesy and manners as integral to life, unwittingly suggested to the child. He couldn't help it. It didn't make sense to make Chung Myung stand after the training he went through. Looking at Chung Myung's current condition evoked a similar feeling as seeing a young puppy left alone in the pouring rain. Pitiful. It's fine. Rather, I'd prefer a little water. Someone, get water, now. Yes! One of the kids who was watching on the side rushed to get water. Right. That. However, Ungom quickly felt silent. What should I ask? He called for him to come here, but he didn't know where to start. It was his first time being in such an absurd situation. What is going on here? He asked the most obvious question. Chung Myung, who received the question, glanced around and opened his mouth calmly. It's nothing much. What? It's just that from today on, we all decided to exercise together in the mornings. But since it was our first time, we may have overdone it a bit. It must have been because everyone was so motivated. Motivated? Ungom looked at the kids behind Chung Myung. They were waving their hands desperately, yet keeping their mouths sealed tightly. However, their hands fell swiftly and they froze in place when Chung Myung slightly turned his head towards them. What sort of act is this? It was absurd. It was unclear how it came to this, but one thing was certain. All the disciples were afraid of this new child. Ungom was no fool. He had already dealt with kids and trained young disciples for 10 years. He can often understand how a situation has developed simply by observing the kids. No, it would be stranger if he hadn't noticed what was happening, even without his experience. These disciples of Mount Hua, are they afraid of a newcomer? Ungom's head slightly tilted sideways in confusion. No. Come to think of it, the skills of these children were by no means weak. Most kids of the same age could only hang their heads low compared to Mount Hua disciples. Even if it was rotting, they were still disciples of the once great Mount Hua. It wasn't that the disciples were weak. It was just that this new child was odd. Did you say morning exercise? Yes. You. Ungom spoke firmly. White Plum Blossom boarding house has its own rules. Who told you to reduce your bedtime and practice as you please? Chung Myung's expression remained unchanged as he spoke as if it wasn't a concern. Then I won't do it. Huh? I thought that training would be helpful, but you said no, so I won't do it. What was that? Ungom was perplexed. This reaction was unexpected. You thought that training would be helpful? Chung Myung thought this question was weird. You think it won't help? An awkward air passed between them. Ungom groaned to himself. He understood what this kid was saying, but Chung Myung spoke first. I felt that it would be enough to learn martial arts from Sasu, but us disciples must always show effort in our own way. The essence of martial arts comes from the body, so I believe this strength training could improve our overall results. That was true. The theory was correct. Your words are right. Ungom readily acknowledged that. However, can you say that being forced to train under threat of coercion is correct? Coercion? Chung Myung glanced back as he continued. Sasu, how could I ever force my sahyongs? When I said I was going to train, they said they also wanted to join in and followed me. What nonsense. A shameless lie. But if he wanted to speak the truth, Ungom would have to ask, didn't they only join in with you out of fear? But I can't ask that. It would crush the pride of his disciples. Yesterday, the disciples couldn't manage one new youngster and had to be hauled out early in the morning to train in fear. Ungom decided not to touch that sensitive topic. And wouldn't this situation turn Chung Myung, the youngest, into a terrifying villain who abused his own sahyongs? That would also hurt his disciples if mentioned carelessly. Just as Ungom was about to say something, Chung Myung spoke. Give me 1 month. I won't let it affect our regular training, and in 1 month, I will deliver you good results. Oh? Although they were discussing training, his hidden intention was slightly different. 1 month. He asked the Sasu to ignore his situation for a month and make his judgment after seeing the result. Look at this kid. It didn't seem like the words of a child. Rather, the words of a strong man full of confidence. 1 month may be acceptable, but this training doesn't seem that simple. Can the kids really endure it? The Sahyungs all practiced because they wanted to, and no one complained about it being hard. Chung Myung spoke brazenly as he glanced at his Sahyungs, none of which dared to open their mouths to refute him. Since no one spoke up, they must be okay with it. Where did this kid come from? While Ungom thought, Chung Myung turned his head and asked, Isn't that right, Sahyungs? Yes it is. We will work hard, very hard. We worked hard today too. Chung Myung turned back. Without a strong will to grow, how could we possibly expect good results from our efforts? The children's faces behind him were shocked and full of exhaustion. Ungom was speechless as the kids were utterly unable to speak out. Despite only 1 day passing, Chung Myung had completely seized control of the disciples. Furthermore, he's asking to allow this to be ignored for 1 month to show Ungom the results of his control. Oh, come on. The more he listened, the more absurd it felt. Where did this little monster come from? But it isn't really a bad thing. The White Plum Blossom boarding house had a significant issue when it came to securing training time. Mount Hua was understaffed, and Ungom couldn't handle it alone. At least 10 instructors were needed, but now there were just 3 people who could train the kids. As a result, they couldn't spare much time to teach any of the disciples one-on-one. Most of the time was spent keeping the group organized, so their growth had begun to stagnate. It was evident that it would be a great help if this kid could relieve some of his burdens. Let me ask you one more thing. Yes, it won't be easy for you either. Why would you choose to train so early in the morning? Chung Myung tilted his head. I don't understand what you mean, Sasu. There was no way that this kid suddenly couldn't answer. To enter Mount Hua means learning the sword, but simply joining the sect doesn't necessarily mean we will become stronger. To become stronger, diligently training and striving for higher goals is the duty of any disciple. That is right. Of course, we can become stronger by following Sasuk's teachings, but if we can put in our own effort as well, the process can accelerate. It's only natural that some sleep must be sacrificed if it means working harder to achieve our goals. Right, it was that. There's no particular reason, only a passion for training. Jangmun said we would no longer accept new students. I wonder what sort of child will receive an exception. Perhaps a new wind is beginning to blow on Mount Hua. Wouldn't it be quite worth it to bring this kid up? His talent hasn't been confirmed yet, but he should be able to achieve great things even without it with such motivation. Even if he's unable to become a master, his attitude could have good influence on the other children. You seem to be having a hard time with your training. It's because it's my first day. Still, it seems difficult. The more we do, the better the results. Ungom's lips trembled as he struggled to stifle a smile. This is it. Doesn't this training perfectly match his own theory? It might be fine to push the others to their limits if such a kid leads them. After all, in the sect's old days, the children would often form hierarchies not restricted slowly by age. And what is the most important when dealing with your sahyungs? Be polite, show respect, and follow their words. He means to maintain this hierarchy while showing proper respect to his elders without despising or looking down on others. Ungom looked around and nodded. Unable to understand what was happening, the kids were all worried. Ungom coughed as he averted their gaze and opened his mouth. It's quite touching that you all were voluntarily training from dawn till now. Sasu! Master! Shouts of confusion and shock, but Ungom ignored it all and continued. If you continue to train like this in the future, you will achieve great results. This child seems to know much about training, so I will allow you to continue. Try your best. Damn it, we're screwed. Wow, he's abandoning us like this? Look at him avoiding our gaze. The young kids were in a state of despair. Then make sure you have your breakfast before it gets late, and make sure to come out in time for the morning session. Ungom slowly turned and then suddenly stopped. Ah, that's right. Yes, of course. There's no way this man would really throw us away so easily. It'll interfere with your training, so you no longer have to come and wake me up in the morning. Training comes first after all. Okay. Ungom grinned and turned away. The disciples wanted to reach their hands out to catch him, but he vanished from sight before they could even move. Crack. At that moment, there was a faint crackling sound. It was Chung Myung cracking his knuckles. He turned to them with a smile. It was a smile, but the veins on his forehead were bulging, making it clear how he felt beneath his grin. Sasu, help me, please! It's not like I said I was going to kill you. Now, my dear Sahyungs, how about we have a little chat in the boarding house before having our meal? Move it. Yes. It was at this moment that many young hopes and dreams disappeared from Mount Hua. Chapter 17. Are you serious? Yes, Sahyung. Eunam's face began to distort. Eungom tilted his head at the unexpected reaction. You didn't know? How could I have known? Huh? I thought that the sect leader brought that child in with some purpose. I guess he didn't. We can barely afford to make it through each day in our current situation. We can't spare additional expenses trying to recruit hidden talents. He was a tenacious child who sought us out himself, and he was taken in by the sect leader. Eungom stopped. This child was accepted by the sect leader, who said he wouldn't take in any more disciples, so he thought that there must have been some story behind it. But the wind bringing change to Mount Hua wasn't intentional? It seemed that Eunam didn't know anything more. Is there some secrets that only the sect leader knows? No, that kid really came here on his own. How strange, Eunam said. The more I think about it, the more bizarre this is. A mysterious boy traveled alone from afar, claiming to want to be a disciple of Mount Hua, and within a day, he'd taken hold and was enacting some sort of plot. Perhaps I'm just overthinking. He wondered if this kid was a spy sent by another sect to hasten their ruination, but it felt unnecessary. First, Mount Hua was already in a sorry state and on the verge of collapse. Second, even if such a plan existed, sending a child too young to develop the necessary skills wouldn't make sense. And if a child with such talent existed, the sect would do everything they could to nurture and guide them rather than sending them to rot away here. If that's the case, wouldn't it be better to keep an eye on him? Let's leave him be. But Sahyung, you didn't stop him because you believed he could meet your expectations, right? Instead of answering, Eungom lowered his head. I am well aware of your hard work. It's only natural for you to lead the disciples, but even you can't accomplish everything on your own. No, Sahyung, It's all right. Eunam laughed softly. It is difficult for everyone. I'm not sure what he's thinking, but if you believe it will benefit Mount Hua, there's no reason to stop him. Eungom raised his head and looked at Eunam. I'm not sure. That kid, Eungom. Yes, Sahyung. That child is now a disciple of Mount Hua. Eungom's eyes lightly shook. At times, we may be biased towards a child who comes first. However, even if he came later, all children who come to Mount Hua must be cared for as our disciples. I was short-sighted. Eungom bowed his head. Even if he crosses the line, it won't be too late to stop it then. Yes, Sahyung. Eungom stood up. I'll take my leave. Sure. Eunam poured himself a cup of tea as Eungom walked away. What a strange boy. Indeed, an unusual child has arrived in the sect. This kid didn't bother trying to hide his presence, despite bringing about a drastic change. Whether these changes would be a blessing or a curse was unknown. There's just one thing. Change is necessary. What Mount Hua needed now was a new wind. Floating in the open sea without wind will leave you lost and starving. Even if the destination is unknown, you must set sail. Whether the final stop is paradise or a desolate island, it was better than dying, unmoving, in the open sea. Eunam brought the teacup to his lips. He hoped that Chung Myung would be the wind that moved Mount Hua. Of course, whether he can keep calm when the wind turns into a typhoon remains to be seen. I think I'm going to die. I'm already dead. A chorus of pained wails echoed from all around. Now, of course, those who were speaking on the verge of death were Mount Hua's third-class disciples. What fresh hell is this? A new type of torture? They knew it was an exercise to build muscle, but it's not like Mount Hua neglected strength training. A solid body is the foundation of all martial arts, and even the Shaolin sect would have its own rigorous training regimen. But this is unreasonable. Yunjong lowered his head and looked at the table. Stir-fried vegetables were served as a side dish, but his hands were shaking so much that he couldn't accurately put them in his mouth, and he spilled food all over the table. Ugh, I can't even eat properly.
We have swordsmanship training in the afternoon. Will I be able to swing my sword with my hands shaking like this? If it was a real sword, wouldn't it fly out of my hand and pierce someone's ass? Thankfully, I don't think I have enough strength in my arms to swing with that much power. Are you really thankful for that? Yunjong sighed. Say it to his face. To his face. If they want to complain, shouldn't they do it to his face? What good does it do to talk behind his back like this? There is nothing I can do. Great Sayong! Groans emerged from the crowd. However, Yunjong just silently picked up the stir-fried vegetables. What could be done about it now that Ungom has taken the same side as Chung Myung? Sayong, in such situations, it doesn't matter if it's Sayong or not. But shouldn't Great Sayong's opinion hold some weight? Yunjong sighed and was about to speak when a sharp voice came. How pathetic. What a rotting conversation. The crowd of third-class disciples had their eyes drawn in unison to the one who spoke. Jogul? There was a moment of silence before Jogul, who was eating quietly in the corner, began to speak in a sharp tone. Do you think Great Sayong is your errand boy? Chung Myung isn't hiding from you. If you have something to say, you can go say it to his face yourself. No, If you can't speak up in person, just be quiet and eat. If you don't eat, you won't be able to survive in the afternoon. No one could open their mouths to argue after hearing what Jogul had to say. Yunjong's eyes met with Jogul's gaze. He's acting strange. If this were the usual Jogul, he would be the loudest to complain about Chung Myung. After all, he was the strongest and most vocal among the third-class disciples. It became difficult for others to open their mouths and disagree when even Jogul took Chung Myung's side. Tak. Jogul put down his chopsticks and approached Yunjong. Great Sayong. Can I see you for a moment? Sure. Yunjong put down his chopsticks and stood up. The remaining disciples tilted their heads as they watched him leave. Are we looking at something the wrong way? Yunjong spoke first once they arrived in the deserted area. You look pretty pissed off. Jogul lifted his hand and rubbed his face. Is that how I look? Your face is quite easy to read. That's the first time I've heard that. Jogul laughed. Even after all that training, you can laugh like that? Sayong. Huh? What do you think of Mount Hua? Yunjong went silent at the question. It was a sensitive subject that needed careful consideration. It is a difficult question. I was originally planning on going back to my hometown after this. But don't you plan on staying here? Yes. Yunjong nodded quietly. He had already decided to stay here. The other third-class disciples had yet to make their choice, but he would become an official disciple of Mount Hua and live or die with the sect. Do you believe that Mount Hua has any future left? Mind your tongue. That isn't something you can say so recklessly. I couldn't believe there was any hope left. This wasn't something that should be said, yet Yunjong couldn't condemn Jogul. He had often had similar thoughts in the past. Do you mean to say that you've changed your mind? A little bit. It's changed? I was forced into this training, but it made me realize I've never done any training that pushed me to my absolute limits until recently. That is true. Yunjong nodded his head without realizing it. He had never done this kind of training. He always thought he was trying his hardest, but never pushed himself to the limit where his body trembled like now. But that guy didn't seem tired at all, even though he did twice what we did. Twice what we did? Along with doing double the repetitions as everyone else, Chung Myung also used more dirt bags. The intensity was on a completely different level from the other kids. Yunjong had checked the weights himself and couldn't believe his eyes when he saw Chung Myung using a weight heavier than his own body. He's strong. He's not just strong, but he's younger than us as well. I don't believe he was born powerful, so he must have grown this strong through his own efforts, right? You're right. Sahyong, I thought it would be impossible for me to become strong in Mount Hua. I thought I would stagnate at a mediocre level and leave. I never even thought of becoming a master known throughout the world. Jogul, listen to the end, Sahyong. Jogul gulped and continued. But looking at him, I realized I was wrong. I mean, is there anyone our age who can even compare with him? I don't think so. There never will be. Despite being the eldest, Yunjong wasn't the best among third-class disciples. Even still, he was confident in his skills. He was sure that even if he had to face a disciple from one of the great sects, he would still be able to corner them. But that monster flipped Yunjong upside down with one finger and knocked Jogul, who was stronger, into the ceiling. How could another monster like him exist? It doesn't matter which martial arts you learn. What's important is how you learn it. I thought it was just an empty phrase that sounded good on the ears. Seeing him, though, I realized they were honest words. Sahyong, I want to do my best. I feel the same. Jogul nodded his head. So Sayoung, please, this may be an opportunity for our generation to experience a massive change. Even if he is a little sarcastic and arrogant, let's follow him for now. Yunjong looked at Jogul. Jogul had excellent skills. He had the ability to grasp the flow of things around him due to his experiences down in the world outside. If such a person became a merchant, he was bound to become successful. If such a person was speaking like this, let's do it. Sayoung, you are right. As of right now, nothing matters. I am someone who decided to stay in Mount Hua till the end. I will do anything I can to help Mount Hua. At Yunjong's words, Jogul nodded his head. It's funny though. All of this because of the youngest who just joined us yesterday. He may be the youngest, but he's far from normal. That's true. The two smiled lightly and turned around. Their talk was done. No matter how childlike they were, they seemed wise. Gul. Yes, Sayoung. Can we really become strong? One thing is certain. If we can't become strong, then we can always train harder. Such comforting words. The two returned after this brief exchange, and until the very end, they were unaware that they were being watched. Chapter 18. Seems like I got two good ones in the bag for now. Hidden in a tree, Chung Myung had spied on Jogul and Yunjong's conversation as he was lying down comfortably with a rice ball next to him. I never used to be this merciful. If he entered the dining hall now, the Sayoungs wouldn't be able to eat. He should at least let them have a proper meal. Isn't that the most humane thing to do? Chung Myung patted his stomach and sighed. I caused a bigger mess than I intended. Initially, he planned to lay low, but those kids came and plucked the nose from a sleeping tiger, so he had no other options. What more can be done? Some things can be tolerated, but there are lines that cannot be crossed. There's no changing the past. Thankfully, Ungom was easy to communicate with. He perfectly understood what Chung Myung was trying to say when they spoke. Thanks to that, things were a bit easier than he thought. Of course, he had prepared countermeasures if Ungom didn't understand, but that would have been more troublesome. He's smarter than I thought. Smart. Certainly, Ungom understands Chung Myung clearly. However, as a young disciple of Mount Hua, looking down on his senior only to reevaluate him as smart seemed disrespectful. But that was still a compliment, right? This is so complicated. It seemed like it would take more time to get everything organized. His position within Mount Hua still wasn't clearly defined yet, but those two are definitely smart. Chung Myung's eyes followed Yunjong and Jogul from a distance as they entered the dining hall. When so many people gather, there will always be a few who stand out. In Chung Myung's eyes, these two could be the core of the third-class disciples. I've got a good idea. Aren't they quite unique? Typically, they would be on the verge of death if they were pushed that far. Complaints would pour unceasingly as they agonized over the pain. But not these two. They desired more. Chung Myung found that quite admirable, especially Jogul. Despite being beaten so thoroughly by someone younger than himself, he held no grudges. What's more, it even motivated him to work harder and gave him confidence that he could grow stronger by following Chung Myung. If Chung Myung had any money left, he'd certainly gift it to Jogul. If I raise him well, he will be of great use. Chung Myung smirked and bit the rice ball. Discovering talent was important, but the main priority now was Chung Myung. First and foremost, body strengthening. The foundation was laid. There was still a long way to go, but it can be said that the most dangerous section has been passed. So now he can learn martial arts in earnest. So what did he need the most? A perfect body. Having returned to a younger body with all his past knowledge, can't he get stronger through cultivation? He could. However, a theory is a theory and reality is reality. No matter how much martial arts knowledge he holds, if his body is too weak to perform, then he'll be unable to reach his full potential. He cannot do internal energy training with his mind alone. Only through blood, sweat, and tears will your body adapt. For that, what's most needed is to develop strong muscles. Isn't the sword of Mount Hua swift and dazzling? Mount Hua's sword technique requires you to swing fiercely with the strength of 100 arms within one. The sword is beautiful, not the body. If the body is weak and unable to endure the technique, then the sword will never be dazzling. To make plum blossoms bloom, the roots must be strong. The root of martial arts is the body. I can't just see what I want to see. The people are drawn to the gorgeous sword arts of Mount Hua. Thanks to that, they don't see that there are people out there who would swing their swords to kill them too. Ah, damn it. Damn foundations. Why is this so complicated? Can't I just stab him? Why do I have to swing 3 times when I could just stab him in the face? I'm going to break my wrist. Like a swan that gracefully swims on the water, yet below the surface, the swan's legs flap desperately. The sword should be graceful like the swan, while the body, like the swan's legs, is the engine that drives it forward. So you train and train again. Even if you only digest a quarter of the training, after 3 years, they will have forged the strongest bodies and been reborn. By then, Mount Hua might not be the world's most gorgeous, but they would become a sect that can take down Shaolin. Chung Myung smiled and stood up. The problem isn't the kids, it's the seniors. The kids will follow and get the hang of it, but you can't treat the seniors in the same manner. When he thought of Ungom, he sighed. He isn't that bad. You could feel how hard Ungom worked from the pressure emitted by his body. It isn't easy by any means for a person with no proper teacher to rise to this level. If he can receive the right instructions before it's too late, he will be a good swordsman. But how do I give it to him? Chung Myung scratched his head. This was annoying. It would be nice if he could say it, but that would cause disaster. He didn't have the confidence to deal with it, so he thought of ways to naturally hand this information over. Chung Myung scratched his head. Since he wasn't used to using his head and making plans, finding answers was hard. Should I return for now? To find the solution, he had to know the full situation. He must first know what techniques are being practiced and if the sect's martial arts are being transferred properly through each generation. Jogul gulped as he looked at Chung Myung sitting cross-legged. Maybe I was wrong. Get stronger. Train. That all sounded good and he liked it. But to do that, he would have to live with this guy. Can I handle this? The more he let his thoughts run free, the more it felt like something was wrong. So, yes. There's no need to be tense, Sai-hyung. Huh? Is that everything? Yes. You can just speak casually. Yep. Chung Myung frowned, looking at Jogul, writhing uncomfortably. This is really all that you have? It is. Really? You can You know what? Forget it. Do as you please. Once he gets more comfortable around him, Jogul can naturally change how he speaks. Chung Myung grabbed his head and looked at the paper. So these are all the martial arts being taught? Jogul nodded his head. Huh. I'm gonna go crazy. Chung Myung moved a little as he stretched his body. What is he doing? He suddenly called Jogul over and had him write a list of all the martial arts taught here. Once he received the list, Chung Myung seemed to lose his mind. This is all? He kept reciting the same line again and again like a parrot. Sasuk had previously taught us that you need to make sacrifices to become strong. But it seemed like this kid even threw away his sanity. Sai-hyung. Yes. Isn't there anything other than this? Is there possibly a restriction on what Sai-hyung can learn? We aren't allowed to read the techniques, but just seeing them is fine. That's all. Chung Myung looked at the paper again. He had guessed it to some extent when he heard that the sect no longer had their sword techniques and replaced them with worthless ones. But this was too serious. No, what good would these do? Not a single thing on the list would help them. Were these old people deliberately trying to ruin Mount Hua? So you are saying that now the Tai Flummox sword is being taught? You know that already. Chung Myung scratched his head. This is more serious than I thought. Having people around was indeed more important than having martial arts books. But is that all? What good are people if they don't know how to use? Even if they held swords, these people would be beaten while their enemies used tree branches. Tai Flummox sword didn't meet Chung Myung's standards. If only we had the 7 Blossom sword, then Mount Hua wouldn't be like this. The more he thought, the more trouble he felt. Chung Myung tried to calm his raging mind when Jogul suddenly spoke. From what I heard. Huh? Chung Myung didn't even ask, but he spoke on his own accord. When the demonic cult attacked, the West Building was set on fire. A fire in the West Building? No, rather than that. The demonic cult invaded? What did the demonic cult attack Mount Hua for? Wasn't their heavenly demon dead? Jogul then asked, Do you know of the Plum Blossom Swordsman? I know. He knew very well, because no one knows him as well as himself. Sasuk said that the Plum Blossom Swordsman helped kill the heavenly demon. Helped? He beheaded that bastard, not helped. Chung Myung's face brightened a little as his disciples knew about him. That's what was said. What? The Plum Blossom Swordsman killed that demon. Huh? Who said that? What do you mean who? What? Chung Myung tilted his head. What? Wait a second. It is impossible to say, because everyone on that mountain had died at that time. No one knows who killed the Heavenly Demon. Right, they all died. Chung Myung was the last one standing before he finally severed the Heavenly Demon's head. So, no one saw. Yeah, no one knew. Chung Myung understood. No, then, for the honor of Mount Hua, I gave my life to defeat the Heavenly Demon, yet no one knows it? What kind of disgusting situation was this? Anyway, at that time, the Heavenly Demon fell, and the remaining demonic cult people went crazy and tried to push for vengeance. Despite taking a lot of damage, they climbed up and set fire to Mount Hua. Cold sweat began to flow down Chung Myung's body. However, Jogul didn't notice and continued calmly. Even if we don't know what happened, they seem to have a strong grudge against Mount Hua. That. Jogul may not know, but Chung Myung did. To sum it up, Mount Hua was smashed after that. Because of me? Huh? So you're saying that it's all because of me? Why are you laughing all of a sudden? Oh, my life. Chapter 19. Now he had a rough idea of the situation. The alliance, which climbed the 100,000 mountain, was utterly annihilated. However, the 100,000 mountain is the home of the Demon Sect. It wouldn't be surprising if some of them survived the war. Those Demon Sect survivors must have witnessed Chung Myung killing the Heavenly Demon. Ugh, damn. All the people who should be recognized were dead, and not a single person knew he survived. Meanwhile, his enemies survived and came for revenge. What the hell is this? Jogul felt a chill and stepped back. Why are you suddenly angry? Gah. Chung Myung rubbed his face. I need to calm down. It wasn't something he should be angry about in front of Jogul. So those bastards stormed in and wiped out Mount Hua? I don't think the damage was that great. They also spent a lot of energy getting here, since they came through a difficult path. Quite a few of the buildings burned down, and many of our martial arts were lost in the process. It was understandable. No matter how poorly this place was maintained, it wouldn't have fallen to this degree without something like that happening. Martial arts can still be learned without a teacher to guide you. Even if you must walk through hell to succeed, it's 100 times better than nothing. On the other hand, if even the martial arts were lost, it explains how Mount Hua could collapse so quickly. That explains it, but it could be clearly explained. But why is it so heartbreaking? Okay, I get it. Chung Myung stood up from his seat. Where are you going? A walk. I need to clear my head for a moment. Sasuk will come to check on us soon. We may end up being scolded. Right. Thanks for letting me know. Jogul, looking at Chung Myung as he left, shook his head, unable to understand. He sure is a strange guy. Crazy! A fire was raging within his body, contrasting wildly against his facial expression, which exuded a chill that seemed to freeze one's soul. I risked my life, sacrificed myself to kill that demon, and those below him destroyed Mount Hua? What the hell are these results? Is there no retribution in this world? His mind began to ache as his thoughts continued, unrestrained. Chung Myung sighed. Now he couldn't even get angry at the pathetic state of the elders in the sect. After all, it was clear why this happened. I don't get it. What kind of loyalty did those people have? If their heavenly demon was killed, they should have just lived cowering in seclusion. Instead, they rushed straight for revenge? If the journey to Mount Hua hadn't been so arduous, it might have been destroyed all the way to the roots. Should I call us fortunate, or were we unlucky? Only a few things were damaged. Still, sitting alone on the rooftop and watching the sun fall as the night approached helped soothe his mind. I guess that's just how the world is. The real reason Chung Myung was distraught wasn't because of what occurred to Mount Hua. He was angry because his successors had to pay for the price for his actions. If Chung Myung had lived after killing the Heavenly Demon, he could have stopped it, but he died, and the young disciples, who knew nothing, had to face the hellish aftermath. As a result, Mount Hua ended up like this. What can I do? No one could criticize Chung Myung. It could be said that a disaster befell the sect because he killed the Heavenly Demon. But if he didn't kill him, then the entire sect would have ceased to exist. Chung Myung didn't have a choice. Even if asked to relive that moment, Chung Myung would still not hesitate to sever the Heavenly Demon's head. But It feels unpleasant. Chung Myung took a deep breath. Well, the past is the past. If it's broken, then we can just rebuild it. Whether or not he's responsible, doesn't his goal remain the same? He must revive Mount Hua and regain the sect's former glory. Worrying won't change anything. What matters is getting results. It will be enough if he can make Mount Hua stronger than before. It might be impossible for others, but not for Chung Myung. It will be a little difficult though. No, there will be a lot of difficulties. It may be even more challenging than cutting off the head of the Heavenly Demon. I'm getting impatient. Impatience is poison to a task. There's a difference between moving quickly and trying to rush. Contemplate the job thoroughly and advance without rushing. All right, let's take it easy. First, let's figure out everything that's been lost. The best way would be simply to ask someone. Where is the sect leader? Come on out. Right. Sect leader is the right... Huh? Who said that? Chung Myung's eyes went wide as he turned to see where the voice had come from. The main gate? There was a loud noise coming from the main gate. At this hour? The sun was setting. Why would visitors come at this time? Sect leader, get out here. Ah, right, the sect leader. Jangmun? Chung Myung touched his ears with a blank expression. What did I just hear? Demanding the sect leader? What crazy bastard is saying that? Such insolence. How dare they assail the gates of Mount Hua and demand the sect leader? In the past, such actions would be inconceivable without enormous repercussions. Before he'd even finished speaking, a teeth-shattering fist would have met the man's face. These people outside didn't seem to be wary of Mount Hua's power at all. Thud, thud. A violent banging on the gate. At the same time, the gate, which was barely in shape, began to rattle and fracture. No, no, no. Whoosh. The front gate finally gave in and made a strange sound as it moved. The gate collapsed to the ground and shattered as dust and debris scattered the area. Chung Myung stared blankly at the scene, clearly dazed. They broke the gate? The gate of Mount Hua? What was happening? Let's go in. Dozens of people smashed the gate and sprinted inside, all of whom ran towards the residence of the sect leader. It didn't seem like it was their first time doing it either. The other sect elders stormed out from their residences at the noise. Whoa, wait, you can't do this. But the opponents were relentless. Get out of my way right now. Move away. Tell him to come out. Sect leader. Huh? Did you just touch my body? Chung Myung's eyes rolled back in shock. What was up with the situation? The intruders broke in as if they owned the place, but the elders seemed to be struggling to block them. Whenever one stepped forward, the elders would step back as if they had been assaulted. It wasn't like they had strength. No. Chung Myung could feel that the elders were strong. Before Chung Myung could understand the situation, the people pushed in and arrived in front of the residence. Sect leader, come out right now. Don't even think of running away. I know you're in there. I'm not going to let you have your way today. Come out. Chung Myung was feeling dizzy. What am I seeing? Where am I? No matter how horrible the downfall was, Mount Hua wasn't a place where such things could happen. Chung Myung felt something hit his forehead as his anger began to boil over. What are you doing? Eh? One of the elders, holding back the violent man, asked Chung Myung and rebuked him. Go inside right now. Why is the third-class disciple wandering around at this time? Chung Myung tried to think of an excuse. Come to think of it, no one but him was here. Despite such a considerable commotion, not a single disciple was here. Does this sort of thing happen often? It was human nature to stick your head out and spy when there was a commotion. Nevertheless, the fact that no one came meant that a code of conduct had already been established in this situation. Chung Myung, who only joined recently, had no knowledge about this. Who's this brat? No, even so, it wasn't him they should be concerned about, but these violent people. Sect leader, come out! I'm not going back like this today. Hiding is no use. Come out! Have you no shame? The people didn't stop shouting in front of the sect leader's residence. Chung Myung's neck began to feel stiff. It happened then. Keek! The door creaked open with a shrill sound, and Hyunjung, the sect leader of Mount Hua, walked out. When he came out, the members of Mount Hua bowed to him. What are you doing here at this late hour? While Chung Myung was getting angry at their words, the sect leader responded in a noble manner befitting his status. He felt proud seeing the man act this dignified despite not having anyone to guide him properly. Every movement was refined, and his words carried strong yet stable energy,
which felt good to the listener, making Chung Myung feel even more relaxed. Truly, what nonsense are you asking? Come down, right now. Why are you acting all calm? Right. He's pretending to be calm. No. Hyunjong's face stiffened slightly as he sighed. I didn't run, nor did I hide. Where would I go if I left Mount Hua? So calm down. Quiet that mouth of yours. Chung Myung was enraged. Even though he spoke to them respectfully, these crazy people didn't even bother listening. The strange thing was how despite that, the sect leader didn't yell, but seemed flustered instead. What sin did he commit to act so meekly? Oh, a particular word came to Chung Myung's mind. Sect leader. A person who seemed to represent this group pointed his finger and shouted, We have waited long enough. We can't wait any longer. The calmness disappeared from Hyunjong's face. No way. When will you pay our money back? The payment day passed long ago. We can't wait any longer. Chung Myung looked at Hyunjong with blank eyes. Hyunjong's virtuous appearance vanished as he opened his mouth with an awkward expression. If you can give me some more time. Chung Myung grabbed the back of his neck and stared toward the sky. Shit. There's debt as well? A collapsing sect is all that's left, and even that is owed to a debt collector? Tears formed in Chung Myung's eyes. His mind was feeling as overcast as the cloudy night sky above. Really? Of all things? Ugh, these crazy bastards.
Chapter 20. We've given you enough time. How much longer are you planning to take? A man can only be so shameless. We have waited long enough. Hyunjong's face was a bit stiff. I know, but... At that moment, a man standing quietly in the back walked forward. As he stepped forward, everyone around fell silent and took a step back. Is he the one in charge? Chung Myung's eyes lit up as he looked at the person ahead. The man had a typical appearance of a merchant. A slightly chubby face, dressed in fine clothes made of the most expensive silk, adorned in elaborate patterns. Looks like he has a lot of money. Chung Myung decided to listen as the man's mouth opened to speak. Sect leader, have you been well? I didn't think the pavilion owner, Kong, would come here in person. A soft smile crept onto the face of the man called Kong. I wish I could meet the sect leader under more favorable conditions. I truly didn't want to climb Mount Hua, but I hope you understand there are far too many people urging me to do something, and I apologize. Hyunjong lowered his head slightly and bowed. Then, Owner Kong opened his mouth with a different voice from before. But sect leader, you must also try to understand the feeling of others. The date of our contract has long since passed. The one called Kong tilted his shoulders back. In Chung Myung's eyes, it was an arrogant gesture. We already know of Mount Hua's difficult situation, and we've looked the other way on several occasions. Nevertheless, if you keep breaking your words like this, it will be difficult to overlook anymore. Chung Myung couldn't say anything. Although he was trying to keep a peaceful face, Chung Myung noticed that Hyunjong's face was twitching subtly. It was a natural reaction. This man, the sect leader, looked after Mount Hua for years, and now suffered from debtors because of what the past sect leaders did. According to the contract, we could demand payment for breaking the contract right now. Owner Kong smiled and shook his head. But we too have benefited from Mount Hua's blessings for many years. Therefore, we are hesitant to take such harsh actions. Owner Kong, we've already waited. Aha! The merchants around him protested, but the man silenced them with a cough. If we don't know how to be grateful, we are nothing but animals. Don't be blinded merely by the kindness you've shown them. It is thanks to Mount Hua's graces and blessings that we can live so comfortably now. Don't forget the work of your predecessors. Right. As everyone understood, he smiled. So, we are going to give you a little more consideration. We will give you 7 days from now. If you don't repay the loan taken in 7 days, then we'll take the price as per the initial contract. Owner Kong, wait for a moment. Sect leader. Owner Kong quietly shook his head. No more. We need the money. We've already been as lenient as possible. If the money isn't ready in 7 days, we will confiscate Mount Hua as promised. Owner Kong turned his head at the sound that came out of nowhere and looked at Chung Myung, covering his mouth. Oh, we've shown something unsightly in front of a child, Owner Kong said. This is all for today. Sect leader, I hope that we can exchange pleasantries and smile together next time we meet. Until then, farewell. As the man moved to leave, the other merchants followed behind him. Hyungjong quietly raised his head to watch them pass. As if he had survived an encounter with a fierce predator, he let loose a small sigh. Frustrated and weak, this sigh seemed to carry an immense burden. So, Chung Myung had his legs crossed and rested his chin on his hand. A merchant of Hua Village. Right. Chung Myung's head was rattling back and forth as he kept thinking. Seeing that, the other kid moved back. I don't know if he'll attack. It's better to avoid it. The reason he was explaining this to Chung Myung was very simple. After returning to White Plum Blossom boarding house with great anger, he called together all the kids from the shopping district who knew about Mount Hua's condition. Finally, the one who answered his questions was this kid. As a result, he explained Mount Hua's state to Chung Myung. Hua Village is the one right under Mount Hua, right? Jogul, who was listening in from the side, asked. Yes, Sahyung. I remember seeing it when I was peddling wares with my father. The Mount Hua Sect borrowed money from the Hua Village merchants? I don't really know. The kid scratched his head. Although he was in Mount Hua, there was no way that third-class disciples would know about the sect's finances. At best, they could guess what was happening. That man, Kong, is the owner of Taehua Pavilion in Hua Village. It is the largest one there, and I heard that he is working on various businesses using it as a base. He is the most successful merchant in Hua Village. So, if Mount Hua needed to borrow money, he was the best person to borrow from. Crack, crack. Huh? Jogul turned his head away as the color in his face turned into a grim pale. Chung Myung kept cracking his neck like a broken wood doll. Saje, calm down. Saje. Taehua. What's wrong? Jogul felt terrified as he saw Chung Myung seemingly lose himself in shock. Of course, they couldn't understand the reason for Chung Myung's strange behavior. Step. Chung Myung, suddenly erupting with vitality, jumped from his seat and stared into the eyes of the other kid. He rushed to the door with lightning speed, grabbed the kid by the collar and asked, Is it true that he is the owner of Taehua? Yes. So the owner of Taehua loaned out money to Mount Hua and now he's trying to confiscate this ruined place? Calm down. Calm down? Are you telling me to calm down? You bastard! Does it look like I'm able to calm down? Chung Myung released his grip on the kid's collar and then scratched his head wildly. What's wrong with you, Saje? Chung Myung couldn't answer that question at all. The reason was simple. There was no way to explain it. Because Taehua is supposed to be loaned to Mount Hua. Being a warrior of Mount Hua doesn't mean that all worldly obsessions would be forgotten and neglected. Any sect without money would be unable to last, regardless of their fame. Sects like Mount Hua especially needed money to sustain their massive size. In the first place, the swordsmen of a sect focused solely on their personal growth and getting stronger. For such people whose only focus is martial arts, it can be challenging to make money and provide for their families. It requires a massive sum of money to feed such people. Therefore, Mount Hua employed several businesses in Hua Village to work for them. One of those operations was Taehua. But now, a business that belonged to Mount Hua was lending money to Mount Hua and trying to confiscate the sect for debt. He couldn't understand it. Right. If what he knew didn't match up with what they were saying, then something must have gone wrong. Sahyung Jogul. Huh? Chung Myung motionlessly called, and Jogul approached him with curiosity and confusion in his eyes. Chung Myung whispered something which only Jogul could hear, and Jogul's eyes opened wide and stared back at him in shock. Dad? Can you get it for me? Jogul stuttered a bit. No, I can, but... Then go and bring it to me. Really? Did you think I was joking, Sahyung? I'll bring it. Jogul left the room with a nervous face. What is he trying to do? Yunjung curiously watched the scene as he tilted his head. Jogul's reaction was weird. Before he could think too deeply, Jogul was already returning while carrying something. With a subtle face, he delivered the item to Chung Myung. Cloth? No, clothing. But why would he need something like that out of the blue? Chung Myung, who took the clothes Jogul gave to him, quickly tossed aside the robes he was currently wearing. He was fully dressed in black clothing, which held tightly to his body. What are you trying to do? I should go get some answers. Huh? Chung Myung answered, if I ask the Sasuks, they wouldn't give me a proper answer and will tell me that a kid has no business knowing such stuff. Obviously, because that's the correct response. So, I will go and ask. Wait! A cold sweat gathered on Yoonjung's forehead as he began to understand where the situation was heading. So far, all of Chung Myung's antics were limited to Mount Hua. Therefore, although there were problems, it was possible to remedy any issues. If he headed down the mountain, though, what sort of problems could he cause? He needs to be stopped. If he was lucky, he might find the information he wanted. But as if that would happen so smoothly. Considering Chung Myung's brazen behavior, he would ask right away without considering who he is talking to. This could create an even bigger problem. If he happens to cause an incident, then the aftermath of what he's done would be uncontrollable. If he couldn't be stopped here, Yoonjung would have failed in his duties. If the adults of the sect found out that Chung Myung caused an incident, they would hold Yoonjung, the representative of the third-class disciples, responsible as well. But how could he stop Chung Myung? If he could be persuaded with words, then he would have already talked him out of it. Yoonjung, steeped in a cold sweat, opened his mouth. What are you going to do? I'm going to ask them directly. And what if they don't answer? Would they not? Chung Myung tilted his head. That usually never happens. Normally, they'll say they'll answer me, so please stop. What? Please stop? You crazy bastard! Yoonjung racked his brains, trying to think of a solution, as he desperately thought about things that would get him a beating if spoken aloud. You are a Taoist, right? Huh? Yeah, you are a Taoist. You are a disciple of Mount Hua. Yoonjung didn't know why, but he felt like Chung Myung had a strong sense of pride in being a disciple of Mount Hua, so he planned on using that. A Taoist shouldn't do such things. We wouldn't be any different from undisciplined groups if you do it. Chung Myung nodded deeply in agreement. You're right. A Taoist shouldn't do such things. Clearly, it seemed to work. Yoonjung's face lit up with a ray of hope. Right? But Sayong, listen up. Huh? There is a Buddhist saying, if you meet a Buddha, kill him. And if you meet an ancestor, kill him. So, for the sake of true Tao, he draped the cloth around his face, masking his features, and then cried out proudly. Sometimes, you need to know when to break the rules. What was this crazy guy even saying? I'm off for the sake of true Tao. Only then Yoonjung realized that stopping this man, Chung Myung, was impossible from the beginning.